This is Luton, and I'm bringing today my full review of the Endgame DLC, which will be available in the coming weeks, date dependent on your system and setup. Endgame features 4 new maps as well as new vehicles, game modes and the new S-Tac weapon. Now, as I've been focusing this week on producing content and information as efficiently as possible, I've not had time to unlock the S-Tac, so that element is omitted from this review. But having spoken to people who have got it, it's in essence just simply a pistol variation, and whilst it's a nice bonus, it doesn't really have any major bearing on games or gameplay. Now, the first thing to remember is I play on the PS3, so my review is based on the first week's gameplay, and I'm sure that these modes can and will play out differently on the PC on a higher ticket count for the maps and so on and so on. So first, let's take a quick overview of the maps and modes that you can play on Endgame. We have 4 maps: Nabandan Flats, Sabalan Pipeline, Keosar Railroad and Operation Riverside. The standard game modes apply with the addition of 2 new modes, Capture the Flag and Air Superiority. 4 new vehicles were also included: the new dirt bikes, the Azrad and modified Vodnik, and lastly the C-130 dropship. I'll talk about Air Superiority individually as it plays out quite similarly regardless of the maps that it's played on. So in brief to start, I'll just mention the Azrad and dropship. Now, the Azrad or modified Vodnik, depending on your starting team, are a force to contend with, and whilst lightly armoured they can take down air and ground armour, and when you have a capable 2-man crew prepared to be disciplined and mobile, it can be enough to tip the course of a battle. Moving to the C-130 dropship, it's a pretty straightforward deal. It's specific to Conquest, it's game by securing the sea base, and it provides you with a power drop spawn and IFV to drop down to the battlefield. Dependent on the map, this can have a very strong impact and is well worth considering as your first point of attack to secure it, as with Armoured Kill. But it's also a great feature to bring in, and it's definitely worth targeting to bring it down from the sky in a burning fireball. Starting off with the new maps, let's begin with Nabandan. This open desert map offers fast flanking and point-to-point gameplay. Its open environment means there's a high danger of attack from the air, so controlling helicopters and jets is a priority for team members on the ground, more so than perhaps on other maps. For Conquest on Nabandan, it comes fast and furious, and as armour is such a strong factor in the map, controlling sea and using the dropship function can really tip the course of a battle. The dirt bikes are ideal on this map for fast flanking and tipping a team in a controlling situation into total disarray. Capture the Flag shares many of these characteristics, and having a strong helicopter crew can be important to take down those pesky bikers carrying the flag around the outskirts of the map. The Azrad, with its dual armament against both ground and air, makes it an extremely strong tool for Nabandan, as it can eliminate heavily armoured targets on the ground and in the air with ease. When it comes to rush so far, Nabandan has been a bit of a walkover with only a few sticking points. I think this is down to the fact that the attacking team are quite heavily armed, so even if they fail on a couple of attempts to take a base, when it gets down to the last 15 tickets, providing they throw everything they have at a base, the defenders usually can't destroy them quickly enough to prevent the base from going down. So Capture the Flag stands out for me as being the most enjoyable game mode so far to actually play on Nabandan, and unusually for me I have to say that I would then rate Conquest as the next best mode to play it on. This is simply down to the fact that I think for Rush, Nabandan it's got too little geographic features to make it interesting, so on those other game modes you tend to get combat focused around the few structures that are located on the map, whereas with Rush it's just like a point-to-point push and open ground in between, which makes it not that interesting and you really are just fighting around the bases with a little going on elsewhere. It doesn't really play out that well, but for Capture the Flag and Conquest you have some really interesting fights and very fast chases all around the map. So moving on, next we come to Sabalan Pipeline, and as I said in my initial overview, a lot of people have been calling this map Operation Firestorm in the snow. This is really an oversimplification because there are so many features of Sabalan that don't appear in Firestorm. The only similarity they bear is the fact that there's a refinery at the centre, and on all game modes it's a large map, and for console that's probably one of the reasons it's coming low down the list for me in maps. I probably won't want to play it outside these first couple of weeks, and on Rush you'll find yourself continually flanked and within an area that is really just too big to defend. This means as a defending force you end up hoping that the attackers don't throw everything they have at you, because if they do and keep that momentum rolling from base to base, the game will be over before you know it. For Capture the Flag, the situation is a little better as the gameplay becomes more focused on specific situations dependent on if a flag is stolen or trying to be secured and captured. So it focuses the players more and means you don't end up in many situations where you have mini battles going on all over the place. For Conquest, Sablan unfortunately reminds me far too much of some of the Armoured Kill maps. It's simply too big to be effectively played on console. Whilst you may have some interesting battles at individual bases, most of the time you're going to find yourself having small scale battles with just 2 or 3 players, which can be at best challenging, but at worst it can be just tedious and dull. Overall, Sablan is a map that is going to be significantly more interesting for PC players than on the console. It just doesn't function there. It could have been made much better simply by adjusting the out of bounds area around the map on all the game modes, and I find it a little bit irritating that DICE can be so short-sighted as to not see this as something that needs to be, fixed up before it gets released. But it wasn't, and so for that reason, while Sablan may look a beautiful map with its snow and complex industrial layout, for me it's a map that I won't be seeking to play as the gameplay is just too slow and it often becomes just really irritating. Next up, it's Kearsarge Railroad. Now, Kearsarge sits basically in the middle for me in terms of how the map plays out. It's a heavily forested map with a lot of igneous rocks exposed from the ground, and the gameplay feels really exciting because of the amount of cover. It means that you're constantly looking for targets, and the dirt bikes and LAVs can really power around on this undulating map. The railroad that runs through the map creates a focus for players, no more so than the bridge at the centre of the map, which will often become a focal position for combat and conquest. One of the main reasons I enjoy Kearsarge more than the other two so far is that it plays out really well on all game modes. Conquest, Rush and Capture the Flag are really engaging and none should be a pushover for teams, both from the attack and defence perspective. The helicopter combat can be particularly interesting on this map because of the terrain, and you'll find yourself making low passing sweeps and Apache style pop-up attacks over hills and tree groups. And the best thing about this map though, it's got to be suited to the new dirt bikes. It's just such extreme fun to go flying around off all the rocks, and much more so than on the maps we've covered so far. Kearsarge will definitely be making an appearance into my regular server rotation, but on which game mode though, that is got to be seen. And for the last map we have Operation Riverside. Now people know already this is my favourite of the DLC, but why? Well, as with Kearsarge, Riverside just works really well on all the game modes. It has really dynamic terrain and feels genuinely engaging and different dependent on which mode you're playing. Rush is brutal and unforgiving, but it really leads you on a journey. The first bases can be claustrophobic, almost, whereas the second and immediately the next base becomes a wide open, making for a huge change in play style. You need to drop a lot of smoke, push down that hill, so you go from these tight sort of gorges straight out into the open. The third base is usually a fast walkover, but the fourth can be a real battle, and then finally you're heading up the hill for a huge bottleneck with a flank of rocks to oversee the extremely close proximity of the cluster of buildings that forms the final MCOMs. For Conquest, it's the roads and topography that makes this map work so well, not to mention again the jumps placed around the map which are specifically for those dirt bikes, and this is the same to be said for Capture the Flag. Both of these game modes play out really aggressively on Riverside, and it never feels like a map that you can go to sleep on. You need to be constantly aware and on top of your game with such a fantastically laid out and interesting map. Overall, Riverside just feels a really great map. Its central hydroelectric plant creates a really strong feature, and the inclusion of the autumnal surroundings and slow moving river through the central valley of the map just make it look like one of the best maps so far for Battlefield 3. The layout and positioning of the bases around the map means that no matter which side you're on, you'll get a challenging and enjoyable game, and it also provides something for all classes, and that's another reason why I rate it up there as one of the best maps on the DLC. So now we come on to the two new game modes, Capture the Flag and Air Superiority. Both of these would be nothing new to Battlefield veteran players, but this is a great time to bring them back into the game. Capture the Flag, as I said in my initial overview, was a real surprise. I was really concerned about how they were going to design the mechanics for this game mode, but they really have hit on a winner with it. My main concern though was that it could become one of two things, either ridiculously easy to score flags or a nightmare to get them back to your base. And whilst it's true that they can be easy to pick up and transport a flag, one thing is that if your team has any sort of discipline, it can be a real battle to even extract those flags from the enemy base in the first place. Another great element is that when an enemy carrying your flag drops it, you don't instantly recap it. This means two things. One is that it gives the enemy a chance to kill you and pick up the flag again, and two is that you really need to work hard as a team to make sure that when you drop an enemy carrying the flag, you have a couple of guys there ready to pick it up. Making a fluky suicide dive towards the flag isn't going to secure it for your team, and you really need to fight to get it back again. One thing is that it's much better to be holding onto your flag than allow it to be taken, because it's going to be tricky to get back if the enemy are defending with any kind of purpose. So, you really want to focus on that defense. You want to make sure that they don't get it in the first place rather than have all the hassle of getting it back again. There's also a time limit to capture the flag, so sitting back and hoping that, someone might score is not always going to be enough, especially seeing as you only need 3 caps to win the whole round. So this game mode is one to definitely try, and I'm genuinely really pleased that it's playing out well on my server at least. Capture the flag is always one of those funny game modes that can either be really enjoyable or a total fail, and in Battlefield 3 they designed it very well with maps and vehicle choices that support the style of play required to make it work for the players. Now, air superiority on the other hand, it's a real mixed bag. It can be either an absolute roller coaster ride or utter hell. For skilled pilots, it's not a walk in the park. No matter how good your circling skills have become in Conquest and Rush, that's not going to help you here. If you start circling around another player here, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get spotted and targeted by anything up to 4 players who will all start locking and engage you with guns and missiles. So throw that air radar out. Turn up your afterburner music and get your dogfighting skills in the mix, because air superiority is here. What does all that crap mean in real terms though? Well, for one thing, I had a lot of people telling me on my videos this week, Lutin, why you no use air radar? Well, the thing is that if you've actually played air superiority, you'll know that it's really not very useful, and you're much better to be taking something like belt speed. Air radar, whilst useful for one-on-one dogfighting, in air superiority you're not going to see 80% of the other players, and even if you do, it's just a confusing mess, and it gives you no useful information other than the fact that you're probably about to be turned into a burning ball of fuel and metal. So when it comes down to it, if you're a skilled pilot, you'll handle yourself, but still end up getting shot down more than you ever thought possible. If you're an average pilot, it's going to be a mix of fun and rage depending on how well your team support you, and if you're a not good pilot, well, just enjoy that terra firma. When it comes down to capturing the conquest flags in air superiority, which by the way is the actual objective of the game, not just endlessly battling other jets, it's quick and easy, but only providing there are no enemy jets in the area as with standard conquest. You need to circle hard to stay around a flag in order to cap it, but when you do, it's 200 points to neutralise and 250 for a cap, so taking a base solo is going to net you 450 points. I've seen so far many games where top scorers on the board have got 0 kills and 15 deaths, but a score of 10k plus, and that pretty much summarises air superiority. And not forgetting, of course, lock-ons. Yes, people have been crying all this week about, it takes no skill, why don't they have a game mode where no lock-on, blah, blah, blah. In my opinion, these people just need to put up and shut up, okay? It's not 1943, it's Battlefield 3. We have modern jets with missile capabilities, and if that's not for you, then go back to a game with canvas-covered planes. I've found that getting locked up by missiles can be no better or worse than the amount of people who use guns, and in honesty, when used in combination with one another, it's the ability of a reasonable pilot that actually makes the difference. You do have countermeasures, and you're going to get shot down one way or the other, so just deal with it is what I say. So we come to the end of yet another Battlefield DLC overview by me. So what's my final conclusion on this package? Well, as with Armoured Kill, it's perhaps a little bit too large on the map size. This could have been easily addressed by just adjusting some of the out of bounds areas in a few key places on maps, and I'm really confused why DICE think they didn't need to consider this when creating a map and package for games across different platforms. It doesn't live up to the awesome brutality and eye-popping design that was Aftermath, but it does bring some fantastic features that are not worth missing. For one, Capture the Flag in air superiority, while no doubt will not be enjoyed by all, provide a good attempt to spark some new life into a game which is now well into an 18-month lifespan. And whilst Armoured Kill was simply too big to function well on console, Endgame is much more appropriate, and it's far from perfect, but it's playable. They've given us some new vehicles, and overall I think it's a good enough to extend the life of the game by at least another few months. Many people have complained about the lack of weapons and we should get new weapons, but in honesty Battlefield 3 already has a large amount of weapons to choose from, and to introduce new guns at this stage in the game is only going to risk creating more problems and imbalance than we already have, and to do that would be it'd be the final nail in the coffin for a game which is beginning to feel a bit tired at this point. My score for Endgame in the last DLC for Battlefield 3 is going to be 8 out of 10. Now you might say that's a surprisingly high score, Lutin, surely. Well, yes it is, but to be honest, Endgame, its only crime is a couple of the maps are a little bit too big for console gameplay, and when you consider that this DLC is going to be released on PC as well, it's going to play out extremely well there. And there's plenty that it does right that makes it hugely enjoyable and interesting for players on PS3 and Xbox. And I think that while not a release you could call perfect, Endgame does enough to carry us through the final phase of Battlefield 3, and it's one player here who's enjoyed this week and feel that it's got, it's more than worth the asking price. So this has been Luton giving you my final DLC review. Please be sure to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I've got much more content to carry throughout my channel, and if you've got people that you think would enjoy this, then please pass it on and share the review. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you soon for some more Battlefield 3 analysis and advice. I'm just going to finish up by saying that later this month I'm heading off again to EA's main studio in the UK for another exclusive look at 2 AAA titles that I'm going to be bringing soon to my channel. So see you next time for those upcoming releases and much more.